Hey everyone, so I've got another Magic the Gathering video for you here today, and what I wanted to do is actually showcase a brew for a deck that I've actually put together kind of myself mostly, and I have been playing this deck a lot this ranked season, and today I actually just made it to Mythic, which is pretty exciting for me. I didn't only use this deck, but this was one of the primary decks that I was using. I have about 4 or 5 standard decks that I like to rotate between a little bit when I'm playing my matches so that I'm not always using the same thing. But this was definitely the deck that, or it is definitely the deck that I enjoy playing the most. So I wanted to kind of showcase this deck because it is different. It's definitely an off-meta deck, and I just kind of wanted to show you how it works. So it is a Sultai Dragons deck. It uses a lot of cards from the Dragonstorm set. The Dragonstorm set was pretty much one of my favorite ones that has come out recently. And it plays more like a control deck. So it really is a Sultai control, which is a little bit weird because you don't typically associate Sultai with a control shell. You know, you might work with the graveyard and do stuff like that. But the thing with this deck is that with the Sultai colors, it has pretty much an answer to everything. You know, it has counter spells, it has removal spells, it has spells that work against enchantments and artifacts in the form of the Stormbrew, Terra Sunder, the Fangkeeper's Familiar. Fangkeeper's Familiar is a phenomenal card. This thing, I undervalued this card so much when I was looking through the Dragonstorm set. This thing has so much utility. It is a big reason why this deck has been a success for me, along with the Rakshasa's Bargain. So Rakshasa's Bargain is definitely the best card draw spell after Stock Up. Stock Up is better because it's only one color, and you know, you don't like put things in the graveyard, and you also look at 5 cards instead of 4, right? But this one is also really, really good. And the fact that it's an instant is extremely helpful because you can just wait. You can just wait on your opponent's turn, see what they're going to do, and decide if you want to cast the Bargain or not. So this thing and the Fangkeeper's Familiar have definitely been kind of carrying this deck for me. So there's the usual suspects here as far as removal and counter spells, and the Roiling Dragonstorm is actually really important because prior to the ban, Up the Beanstalk was in this deck, and it worked absurdly well because I would cast Up the Beanstalk on turn 2, I would draw a card, and then I would cast Rakshasa's Bargain on turn 3, draw a card off of Up the Beanstalk, and then look at the next 4 cards and get 2 more. It was nuts. It is ridiculous card advantage, absolutely ridiculous. But that being said, with the Roiling Dragonstorm, this is still a ton of value because with all these dragons, you know, you can just keep digging through the deck. You just play your dragon, then the next turn you play the Dragonstorm again, play the next dragon, the next turn you play, like, you can really cycle through this deck using the Dragonstorm. And then a big reason why it works well as a control deck is because of the dragons themselves. So obviously Meringue River Regent, you know, it's not just a big body that has a killer effect, right? You can also use the Coiling Cats to dig through the deck. The Disruptive Stormbrood is really important in this deck. That's why there's 4 copies. So you can use it for some early removal. And then if not, later on, not only is it a 3/3 flyer, but it also destroys an artifact or an enchantment. This thing is just going off some games, just destroying whatever my opponent is putting down on the field. And then obviously the Scavenger Regent, you know, you got the Exude Toxin for board wipes and stuff like that. So the fact that they're omens, you know, they all shuffle back into the library, and then you can just keep digging through your library with your card advantage, and then get them again. So that's why this deck works so well. It really does leverage these dragons in a way that allows you to continually have the resources you need. Usually, if the deck's working well, you just always have the resources you need to respond to whatever your opponent's doing, and that's why it plays more like a control deck. The lands took a long time for me to figure out, and I ultimately ended up running 4 of Opulent Palace. And the reason why is because you really need the 3 colors. So in your opening hand, if you have an Opulent Palace, that's just great because you'll probably be able to get the 3 colors very easily if you have one of these in the opening hand. You'll just play your other land and your other land or whatever, and then you'll have your 3 colors. It's really important to also have those 3 colors by turn 3 in the event that you have Rakshas's Bargain, and then you want to dig through the deck, or turn 4 in case you want to use the Fangkeeper's Familiar. So that's why I'm running 4 of the Opulent Palace, and the fact that it comes in tapped is a little slow, but with all the card advantage and drawing and discarding, right, there's so much drawing and discarding in this deck, that you can just discard the extra ones once you get them later on in the game. And then I do have the Restless Cottage in here. This feels like it's the best, a creature land available in these colors. I tried using the Vineland, the Simic one, and then I also tried using the Reef. The Reef I kept in for a while, but my reasoning is that the green is not the primary color in this deck. It's the secondary color to the Dimir colors. So I didn't really need early access to green, or a lot of access to green. So running the 2 Restless Cottages, it's like, well, there's my black and my green if I need it, but I didn't need the green necessarily all the time, right? And really the only double green is the Bloomvine Regent. And at this point, if I'm playing the Bloomvine Regent, it's a lot later on in the game, and I'm just using it to get some life back. So by that point, I'll have the double green. I don't really use the Omen here on this card very much. This card is really in just to be able to Behold a Dragon and just get some life back later on, because it's a slower deck, it's not uncommon for me to fall behind on life. But then the Bloomvine Regent really does help me come back, you know, later on in the game. The sideboard took a very long time to figure out, and honestly, it still feels like it's not completely correct. So there's a lot of black in here. That's pretty much what ends up being switched out, is like, you know, I might take out the Duresses, right? And then I might put in something else. Or I might take out the Cosmic Exiles if my opponent doesn't have small creatures, right? And then do something else that way. Or I could take out Gopher Throat if my opponent's only playing artifact creatures. So switching around the black removal does seem to work pretty well. Extra copy of Duress in here. I found that it wasn't good to run 4 copies of Duress because I do have counter spells and stuff. And I also, like, I didn't really care if, like, artifacts and enchantments and stuff land on the battlefield, because I have ways of dealing with those, right? I have ways of dealing with those if they get on the field. So I didn't feel like I needed to do too much hand disruption. That's also why, like, Deep Cavern Bat isn't in this deck. Ghost Vacuum's in here for obvious reasons. You know, everybody's playing graveyard stuff right now, so another Caustic Exhale, because plenty of dragons in here. It's very easy to you know, get that down for only 1 mana. And what you'll notice is that I don't have any cut downs in here, because I found that I needed the Opulent Palace to be able to get the mana the way that I wanted to, which was more important. But if I'm playing Opulent Palace turn 1 every game, which is typically what happens, then I'm not going to be able to cast cut down. So having the cut downs in the sideboard, I wasn't really getting the value, because the Caustic Exile is just a better removal spell than Cut Down, because it's just -3/-3. It gets around indestructible. If something has like 4 power, 5 power, 6 power, but it only has 3 toughness, then you can still get rid of it, which Cut Down does not do. Especially the Delirium deck with the Beastie, and then the Witch with what is it? The Wicker Folk one that can become a 4/3. So the Caustic Exile is just better in this deck when I have this many dragons. I can pretty reliably cast it for only 1 mana. Intimidation Tactics in here. Similar thinking to not having the cut down, because if I'm playing Opulent Palace turn 1, then I can disrupt my opponent's hand once I see what they're doing. You know, if they play a creature, then I might Caustic Exile it, but if they don't play a creature, then Intimidation Tactics does usually feel like a good follow-up. At least if this is, again, mostly for like the Dimir decks. I mean the Delirium decks and stuff like that. Actually, it is pretty decent in the Dimir decks too. Now that I mentioned that by mistake, because you know, you can get rid of the fairies and stuff like that. So this typically goes in when I'm on the play, actually, which is a little bit counterintuitive. You might think it's better to put it on when I'm on the draw, but again, because I have Opulent Palace, if I'm going up against a Dimir deck, then they'll start with their Spyglass Siren, and then I can Caustic Exile that Siren, or I'm sorry, I can, on my turn, I can Intimidation Tactics and get rid of their their fairy, or whatever it is. But then, or their flood puts drowner or something like that. But then on their turn, when they crack the map token to put a +1/+1 counter on the Siren, then I Caustic Exile it. So it's actually a really, really good counterplay to the first turn of going up against the Dimir decks. And then Maelstrom Pulse. Now, Maelstrom Pulse I originally had in the main deck. I actually had 2 copies of it in the main deck, and then I had 1 copy of it in the main deck. And the reason why it's not in the main deck is because I found I just wasn't getting the value from it. Because I was thinking, like, why would I try to remove something at sorcery speed when I can just remove something at instant speed? And if I need to get rid of something that's not a creature, I can just do it with my creatures instead, you know? So I found that I just wasn't really getting the value from the Maelstrom Pulse that I wanted to be getting. This is really only good against decks that go wide, like mono white tokens it's pretty good with, but also the go wide Boros deck with all of the tokens and stuff, because sometimes they have like multiple goblins and everything like that. So that's typically when this gets sideboarded in. So that is the deck tech, and I was originally planning to do like a live commentary of a game that I was going to do playing this deck. But I've tried recording a number of live commentaries, not only today, but previous days, and I find that it's actually really interfering with my play. That might sound a little weird, but the bottom line is, I just play better when I'm not trying to do a commentary. When I'm not speaking, I'm just thinking in my brain, you know, everything that's going on and everything that I need to be doing. I found that it was just a lot harder for me to play at my best when I was doing the commentary, and I was making a lot of mistakes and stuff like that. So instead of it being a live commentary, I recorded the game beforehand, and I'm going to do a voiceover commentary walking you through the decisions and the gameplay and stuff like that, which actually does have its own merit anyway, because then when you go back and watch your own footage, you can pick up on mistakes that you make, right? So that's what I'm going to do next, and I hope you enjoy the match. The match was pretty interesting. I lost the first game pretty convincingly. I got kind of run over, but then I ended up coming back and coming away with the win. So hope you enjoy the match. So this is my opening hand for the first game, and the key thing here that I'm considering is that I don't have green mana. It really is important with this deck to have all 3 mana sources, but I figured that between the removal spells, the negates, right, I would be able to just sustain myself enough in the early game until I drew a green mana. Didn't get a green mana off the draw. Did get another Disruptive Stormbrood though. Not a bad draw in this case. And you can see it's definitely Orzhov, right? So I'm just going to get rid of that Knight of Dawn's Light right away. I just don't want my opponent gaining life. And it was just easy enough to do with Caustic Exile, so still didn't get the green source at this point, and that doesn't make me a little concerned. Then they play the Knight of Malice, and I'm really debating removing this thing. Mostly just because they only have 3 cards in their hand, and I don't want them to get any momentum while I'm still kind of waiting for my land. So I wanted to see what I drew first. It was not a green source, it was a Demolition Field. Helpful against the Restless Fortress here, but I decided just to remove the Knights. However, this ended up being a really bad play, because there is Elenda, and I have no way to deal with this. So I realized what I should have done instead is use my Demolition Field to get rid of the Restless Fortress, and then I could have just searched for a forest. And then I would have played that forest, and then I would have had all the colors I needed to play Fangkeeper's Familiar. Well, at least assuming that I had drawn another land off of the top. Now I'm just way behind. I pretty much have no way to remove this thing. I gotta draw a Shouldered Edict or something. So I'm going to remove the fortress, and I'm going to finally get my green source. And now I'm thinking that I can just use any of my instant spells. I just can't use them on Elenda, unfortunately. It's crazy. My opponent only has 2 cards in their hand, but this set me so far back. So I'm just wondering if I should play the Stormbrood, but no point, because Elenda has Menace anyway. I counter the Virtue. And just praying that I can come up with some kind of answer here. Get hit for 5, my opponent goes up to 29, and I'm just way behind, right? So there is the Scavenger Regent, which I unfortunately needed earlier, and I also needed some more lands to kind of use that. So at this point, I don't really have an answer. I'm just kind of hoping that I can get something. But yeah, this is just wait, one card set me way behind. It's crazy because my opponent only had 3 cards in their hand, and now they only have 2 cards in hand, 1 card in hand, but I can't deal with this one creature on the field, right? So it's just GG at that point. I can't even block it with Fangkeeper's Familiar because it has Menace, so I just concede. So now I'm wondering what to do with the sideboard. Putting in Strategic Betrayal seems pretty good. 1 more copy at least, because that is a way to get rid of Elenda. Also, immediately putting in the Intimidation tactics to potentially get rid of Elenda as well. And then I'm kind of wondering what to do here. I was debating not taking out that Terra Sunder because of the Virtue of Persistence, but that's like the only enchantment in this deck, at least most likely. So the Fangkeeper's Familiar and the Disruptive Stormbrood can take care of the Virtue. Maelstrom Pulse is not an instant, so that does kill Elenda. And then I am debating putting in this Frill back, because if I fall behind a little bit, I can gain some life, and then also destroy the Virtue, and then potentially get rid of my opponent's graveyard as well. I kind of second-guessed myself on removing that Roiling Dragonstorm. I decided to put it back and instead take out a Dispelling Exhale. It didn't feel right to have that many counterspells against this deck, so now I'm just trimming the fat. No need to have 3 Regents and 2 Bloom Vines. So now this is the third game, and the second game, sorry. And this is a pretty decent opening hand, but again, I don't have all 3 of my colors. Like, I have a lot of good things to work with, but you know, seeing that Cecil come down and then not having all 3 of my colors was definitely a little bit intimidating. So I'm actually debating not removing it, because I don't mind my opponent losing life. This I really think is a weakness with Cecil, is that you do lose life right when he does damage. So at this point I was thinking Cecil's actually kind of helping me, because I can't do any damage, but hopefully I have a better late game than my opponent does, and my opponent will be at less life, right? Cecil also counters the Elenda, because now you have less life than you started. So it's actually kind of I don't know if it's a good idea to run both of those cards in this deck. Here I'm going to remove the Oathsworn, because I don't want it to get really big, because it gets counters every time it does damage, so that seemed like a good target to remove. Knight of the Dust Shadow, not terrible. It does have Menace though. Cecil keeps attacking, which again, I think it's a mistake to have Cecil and Elenda in the same deck, because Cecil literally counters Elenda. And at this point, I'm thinking of not really doing anything. I kind of like the idea of just passing the turn, taking a little bit of damage, and drawing cards off of Rakshas's Bargain. So I was debating playing the Throwback just to block Cecil, but I was like, no, you know what? Let me just keep pinging my opponent down with their own card. So, they attack. They take 2 damage. And then they play Dragoon's Lance, which I was not expecting. Thankfully, I do have ways of dealing with artifacts in my deck too. So now I'm just going to cast Rakshas's Bargain, dig through the deck, and this was a tough choice. This was a really, really tough choice, because there's so many options. Do I want the counter spell? Do I want the extra card draw with Rakshas's Bargain? Do I want the Analyze the Pollen, right, to potentially get another creature? It was really tough, because I'm thinking, like, you know, when is Elenda coming? Could they have Elenda? They only have 3 cards in their hand, right? This was a really, really tough choice. I ended up taking the Fangkeeper's Familiar just because if they have a Lenda, then I can just counter it no matter what. And not only that, I was also thinking that I have lands, so I could play the Familiar and or I could play the Analyze the Pollen and still have mana up for Fangkeeper's Familiar. That's why I was kind of settling on this potentially. But this was a tough choice because if I don't take the Rakshas's Bargain, I have no card draw, right? If I don't take the Dispelling Exile, then I might not be able to counter something later, but ultimately I did decide on the Fangkeeper's Familiar and the Pollen. So drawing that Opulent Palace was also interesting because I only have one blue source. So I was really debating just not playing that forest. But it was this point when I thought I can play the Throwback and I can get rid of the Lance, which definitely felt like the right thing to do. So I just tap for 1, destroy the Lance, and now I'm thinking I can deal with the rest of the creatures by going to get my Regent, my Scavenger Regent. So that was, I think, the best way out of that situation. Now I can Scavenger Regent the board. I can block Cecil. What do I care? You know, he's going to die no matter what, so I might as well not take the extra 2 damage. And my opponent went for a big attack here, which implied to me that they didn't really have anything in their hand, because they're using their mana to buff the Dust Shadow. So they don't really have anything. So now I'm still kind of wondering how to go about this, because of the Opulent Palace coming in tapped. I want the 2 blue sources, but at the same time, I want to be able to cast potentially Scavenger Regent to wipe the board, well, the Omen to wipe the board, and then the Roiling Dragonstorm. So this actually did felt like a pretty big turn for me, because I'm only at 7 life, right? And I didn't want to choose the wrong thing when I already had a lot of momentum going my way. So, well, when I had some momentum going my way, I should say. So, casting Rolling Dragonstorm. This is just to mostly kind of help me with my decision here. And you can see how I got the Meringue River Regent. So because I got that, I was thinking, oh man, maybe I should have played the Opulent Palace, right? But then I wouldn't be able to wipe the board. So now I'm thinking that I just need to buy some time, and Meringue can potentially just be the final thing that I need to do. So this turn I wasn't expecting. Discover 5 off of the Hidden Necropolis. I haven't seen an opponent do that for a while, and look at what card they hit. I thought that this was fine, though, in this case, because look at how much life my opponent has, right? They only have 12. So the fact it's unlikely that they would be able to buff a Lenda. So at this point, I'm just going to play the tap land and throw out Gloomvine Regent. Gain some life back, get back my Roiling Dragonstorm. Getting back the Roiling Dragonstorm was really the main reason for that, because now I can play Meringue and Roiling Dragonstorm on the next turn, potentially. So that's why I did that. Knight of Malice comes down, and Cecil, so they basically just play everything. Drawing Go for the Throat here really made things interesting. I was wondering how exactly to go about this, and because I have a lot of options, right? I could play the Roiling Dragonstorm and leave up mana for Fangkeeper's Familiar and Go for the Throat, right? I could also play Meringue River Regent, but then I don't have the mana to play Roiling Dragonstorm. That's what I realized when I did this just now, is that I can't play Meringue and Roiling Dragonstorm at the same time, unfortunately. And the thing is, with this deck, you want to be able to do that. You want to be able to play the Dragonstorm and then keep playing your dragons to keep digging through the deck. So doing this, I was like, oh shoot, well now I don't get to dig through the deck, right? But I felt like sending back the creatures to the hand was the best choice here. And then I just attacked because my opponent can't really do anything to me on the next turn. And now I'm thinking if Cecil attacks, I'll just take the damage because my opponent is going to take 2 more damage anyway. And they decided to attack for some reason. and then they take 2 damage. They go down to 6, and he flips, but I'm like, I can just go for the throat him anyway, right? So that's why it didn't bother me. So there we go. Nice turn, nice game to win. Now on the sideboard, I was debating what to do, if anything else. And the one thing that I realized is that this opponent really didn't have that many non-creature spells. There's like a Dragoon's Lance, there's the Virtue of Loyalty, and then I didn't see any other non-creature spells. You know, I just saw like lands and creatures. So I'm thinking like, well, I probably don't need the Duresses in there. I might not need the extra negate, right? And actually what I ended up doing is I ended up just kind of keeping the same cards. I didn't change my my sideboarding at all. So here's my opening hand for game 3. It's not great, but it's also not bad because I do have all 3 of my colors. And, you know, having a Dispelling Exile with a dragon, right? And then I ended up drawing Strategic Betrayal, which was a really good draw. Again, the main thing with this deck is having the 3 colors. Virtue of Loyalty, definitely would have liked to have dispelled that, so that way it can't be cast later, right? So now I'm wondering if I should remove this thing. I ultimately decide not to right away. I want to see what my opponent's doing first. Unfortunately, Virtue of Loyalty is not in the graveyard. It's exiled, so the Strategic Betrayal does not get rid of it. This, I definitely decide to counter. I don't want the Dragoon's Lance on the field when I don't have a way to remove artifacts in my hand yet, right? So that seemed like a pretty good counter. And then I ended up drawing a Caustic Exile, which was actually a good draw. I'm thinking now I can just remove the token and then still have removal up for something else. So yeah, the Caustic Exile was a good draw. Getting a little lucky on this 3rd game here with some decent draws after an opening hand that didn't have much, you know, just had a bunch of lands. Beholding a Dragon, just so I tap 1 mana, and then I still have Go for the Throat up. And then the Oathsworn comes down, and another Oathsworn comes down. So this is an easy Go for the Throat on one of them. And now look at that, I drew a Sheoldred's Edict. These were very, very good draws for this game. And now I'm thinking that I can just get rid of the Oathsworn and then leave up the instant removal. And the Sheoldred's Edict does work against Alinda, right? Because it's not targeting her. It's just, you have to sacrifice it. So Virtue of Loyalty comes down. I was actually kind of glad that that's all my opponent did. So now I'm just waiting. But I actually made a mistake here. So I'm like, oh, I can attack with the Restless Cottage. But this is a really bad attack because my opponent has Restless Fortress. And Restless Fortress is a 1/4 creature. And guess what's on the field? Virtue of Loyalty. So that was a really, really bad attack on my part. That was a huge mistake. This thing becomes a 1/5, and you know, look, they gain 2 life, I lose 2 life, and now it's a 2/5. So now I don't have a good answer to it. You know, blocking it with the Restless Cottage would have been the thing to do. And not only that, my opponent had a 2nd Restless Fortress. So now I'm really trying to figure out how to get out of this jam that I just put myself in. It was a really, really bad misplay on my part. I should not have attacked with that cottage. So what I'm thinking is that I have removal for the fortress, right? And then I can just block the other one if my opponent decides to attack. So I'm just going to pass this turn, leave up Fanekeeper's Familiar if my opponent plays something that I want to counter. And otherwise, I'm thinking like, well, if my opponent activates the fortress, I can get rid of one, and then I can block the other one. But I want to leave up 1 removal spell. Knight of Dust Shadow. This is a pretty safe counter with the Fanekeeper's Familiar because it has Menace, and I also just checked that my opponent didn't have the mana to activate the fortress, and they did not. So now I drew Intimidation Tactics. I'm thinking that there would be no point in playing that, since if my opponent had a creature, they probably would have played it. Because the 4 mana is enough mana to play pretty much any creature they have. So I'm thinking that there's no creature in that hand. So now I wasn't expecting to discover 4, and my opponent did find a creature. And this is kind of tough, because now I'm wondering, you know, what to do here. Because I would prefer to go for the throat, the Restless Fortress that has the +1/+1 counter on it. So this was actually tough. I'm trying to figure out what to do. I don't want to waste my Shouldrick Edict because I want to use it on Elenda in case my opponent draws Elenda. And I don't want to use my Go for the Throat either because I want to use it on the Restless Fortress. So what I did is I'm cycling the intimidation tactics. Because I know my opponent doesn't have a creature in their hand. So I might as well cycle and draw a card. And I end up drawing Opulent Palace, which, you know, that's not a good draw. But then at least I'm drawing something else on my turn, right? So there's some value there. And now I'm really kind of stuck trying to figure out what to do. You know, do I use Shouldrick's Edict? Do I use the Go for the Throat? I really don't want to use the Shouldrick's Edict because I want to save it just in case Elenda comes down. And I figured, you know what? If I draw another removal spell, then I still have Shouldrick's Edict. I did not draw another removal spell. I drew Meringue River Regent, which is a great card. It's just not great in this circumstance, right? So now I'm thinking, okay, I have to remove the Restless Fortress with the +1/+1 counter on it. And then with the Edict. And then I have to block the other one with the Cottage. This is my only way out of this situation. But yeah, I mean, I was thinking if I draw another removal spell, right, then I would rather have the Edict available for Elenda as opposed to using it on the land. But I did end up using it on the land, and then I can sack the food, gain some life back. And look at this, I drew the Tranquil Frillback. So what I'm thinking here is that I can double block the other fortress, and then getting rid of the Virtue of Loyalty felt like the safer option here. So I can exile the graveyard, I can do everything, I can gain some life back, and I figured that getting rid of that Virtue was a little bit of a safer way to navigate this, since I didn't have a removal spell in my hand, right? So, and then I'm wondering if I should attack, but I'm thinking no, so I can double block the fortress potentially. So at this point, momentum completely in my favor. My opponent scoops because they know I have the Regent. So I hope you all enjoyed that, and I will see you in the next video.